Welcome to the third episode of Better Yet. I have two incredible guests with me today, Jason Murray, co-founder of Shipium, and Andy Whiting, co-founder of Better Trucks. And I'm Denise McCann, CEO of Renegade Logistics. I'm going to let the two of you introduce yourselves before we jump in. Jason, you start.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's nice to meet you. So my background, I was at Amazon almost 20 years and started there in 1999. And the majority of my career was really focused on fulfillment and technology. Early days, I worked a lot on the fulfillment centers and kind of in those early 2000s, how e-commerce fulfillment centers would work at scale. Super interesting, really grateful to be part of that whole process. But 2010, I took over the supply chain as the VP over supply chain optimization and technology. And my role in that role, my job was to essentially, as Prime was becoming a bigger and bigger thing, I was in charge of making Prime a cost-effective option. And so we did that by stuff like improving forecasting and improving inventory flows, improving inventory positioning, improving kind of how we optimized and ran our transportation network. And all of that was to ultimately to lead to faster and cheaper shipments. I left Amazon in 2018, started Shipium in 2019, and largely what Shipium is about is trying to fill the gaps in for companies that need this technology to compete in the e-commerce space around how they think about their e-commerce outbound supply chain. And so Shipium's job is to provide the tech to help companies with that. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. All right, drum roll, Andy.
All
Could you
right.
introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Andy Whiting from Better Trucks, co-founder and CEO. Better Trucks is a last mile delivery carrier, headquartered in Chicago, cover about 19 cities right now. Taking a very tech first approach and love partnering with companies like Shipium. So I'm really excited here to learn more about Jason and their team, and then obviously share where we kind of have a similar view on e-commerce. So just really excited about the conversation. Want to talk data, want to talk about the market and where things are going. So yeah, happy for today's conversation.
All right, gentlemen, let's get right to it. So Jason, you mentioned your vast experience with Amazon, or as I like to put it, you're in the belly of the beast. I mean, I'm sure you have so much knowledge that you could share.
Center of the Death Star.
Right, who is still the elephant in the room, Amazon. Do you still believe that that Amazon will set consumer expectations for parcel delivery for 2023?
Yeah, I mean, largely I do. I think that they're still kind of the best in class in the industry. They, the way I look at it is, I think, the Amazon website is notoriously hard to shop on. There's a lot going on. It's hard to find things, et cetera, et cetera. The reason people kind of always go back to it though is because they know when they're going to get their item. They have a predictable promise. It's typically very fast, especially if you're in Prime. And if the item is close, it's super fast, even same day. And they have a wide selection with competitive prices. And so really, not to go too far off course, but kind of that pricing, selection, and convenience, where convenience comes down to speed and predictability, was the three pillars that really drove Amazon, and I think that's still the case. And so it's really outside of Amazon, it's our responsibility to start bringing that discipline and that focus to the rest of the market.
That's interesting because as just a consumer, the commoditization of small purchases that I make, dish soap. I mean, right? I'll do it on Amazon. And I understand what you say about a lot going on the webpage. And that's for a reason. We know that. I mean, it's for the ranking, et cetera. Andy, you mentioned your initial experience when starting Better Trucks with Amazon as well. This one is for both of you. What's the biggest mindset or belief transportation leaders can take away from Amazon? Now, here's the tricky part, and apply to their own last mile delivery approach.
Yeah, I mean, so I think this is why, Jason and I are excited about the partnership, because having seen kind of on the back of, inside of how Amazon goes after it from a last mile perspective, Jason also having been inside the Death Star, as you mentioned, kind of on the tech and fulfillment side, what really separates Amazon or gives that predictability and the promise is the aligned stack of both fulfillment, sortation, and delivery in one. And so as you look at other e-commerce retailers, like how are they going to compete? They need a kind of they can't just have a slow regional delivery company that is bolts onto the end of Shipium, or vice versa. If they have a bad fulfillment experience or inventory placement experience, and they bolt it, and it's upstream from us, that customer promise is not as easy to make. And so I think that like it's a combination of technology companies like ourselves that are actually going to give retailers the ability to compete and alongside of Amazon. So that's what I see.
Jason, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good summary. I would maybe just kind of lean into the fact that, the magic of Amazon was really the technology. Technology allows you to use data for things like prediction and process improvement. It also really allows you to codify these operational improvements and actually create a feedback loop that truly does improve over time. And so when I think, what are we trying to do in market? And it's really about finding that whole tech stack that really uses technology to differentiate itself and obviously then works together and is coordinated. And so, that's kind of my big leaning into Andy's point a little bit more, is I would just kind of emphasize the tech piece.
Well, I've enjoyed watching in the last, let's say, 2 to 3 years, and especially this last year, the last mile carriers like Better Trucks taking more and more market share. I've really enjoyed that because I had 26 years at FedEx, and if you can chip away at those big guys, right? Amazon being one of them, FedEx, UPS. Well, enough about Amazon. Let's talk more tech. Jason, in what ways do you believe technology is reshaping the parcel delivery landscape?
I think, kind of just to reiterate my last point a little bit more, data is a huge part, right? Because I think when you have a lot of, when you're able to capture, this is what happened, you're able to kind of start building these predictive models. And if you can build predictive models, you can then essentially kind of shape the world and the way you route things and the way you move things to hit where that prediction is, right? I mean, whether it's inventory positioning and placement or kind of movement of orders, or even the way that you're thinking about a transportation network and what you need to route around, et cetera. But the second piece, I think, is kind of comes down to that, what I'll say, just coordination and codification. And what I mean by that is just that, the beautiful thing about software is that it's going to do the same thing over and over every time. And it's not going, it's not kind of bound by, we're all humans, we make mistakes, we can only keep so much information in our head. And if the problem is such that it is this repeatable operational problem, it really works great to just keep hammering on, let's build these optimizations and these processes and this communication into software such that you're always going to get the best possible outcome. And so I think to some degree the question is, how is technology reshaping operations and small parcel delivery, et cetera? It's just the fact that it's being used almost in the DNA of these processes now, and that's really what's required to make the whole thing, to move that whole thing forward. And it's a perfect fit, honestly, because it's about timing and precision, and that's what software is really, really, really good at.
Yeah, and I'll add, our company was born in the digital age, right? So we're not transforming from some previous way of doing business. So everything we've done, every delivery is app-based, right? It's not like we went from some sort of former scanner, paper-based routing, all that stuff. We are, app-based. All of our actions under the roof are, scanned and verified and, kind of codified, as you said, around best practices. And we can tweak that software as we see new things fit, to improve the process, and then expect going forward that you're going to have that best possible outcome, like you said. And, really, like, that goes down to, the delivery experience at the door, actually, having drivers with the ability to take pictures, GPS geofencing location to reduce errors at the edge. And, all those things create efficiencies, less returns, all the improvements that you would expect. And again, it's not us coming from a former way of doing business that we had to transform into. It's just native, and it's what people expect. And it's kind of what we expect as a company as well.
Yeah. So you imagine when you make
Yeah.
improvements to your stack, it doesn't take weeks or I'll say months or years for those to feed back. This is stuff that is almost instantaneously. The next order that goes out is now able to take into account that improvement. And that's just the beauty of a digitally native tech stack like that.
Yep. Agreed.
So Andy, you took your background in technology and software development. You started at IBM.
Yep.
You've held critical executive roles with global technology consulting firms for 7 years. What was it about parcel delivery? Did you feel that building better technology could make such an impact? There had to be one thing that you said, I can't, here's an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, so I look back my early days as I worked for FedEx when I was a kid. I worked for FedEx in college when I was writing software. I worked there in Colliersville, Tennessee, at their headquarters, global technology headquarters. So I worked there a long time ago. Always been a big fan of the company. And then you see kind of how Amazon is tackling the problem, right? And so you see this like modern way of Amazon tackling a problem. And, it makes a lot of sense. So you have companies like UPS and FedEx that are, these behemoths that have been, providing incredible service for many years, but in my opinion, kind of still living off the name of many years ago, and are lagging behind in some of their tech investments. And the world is kind of just progressing ahead of them. So I felt like there was a great opportunity to build a delivery company that I wanted to work for and be a part of and be proud of. And technology enables that, and it enables us to scale. And like Jason mentioned, like, we believe that there's, if these big players don't pay attention, companies like us are going to come take a huge portion of their market, if not all of it, over time. So I think it stems from just seeing what's possible, thinking about it, what could be better, what are better ways to tackle the problem. And that really just gave us the inspiration to continue building software to tackle the problem.
It's interesting, Andy, 26 years at FedEx, and I adore Fred Smith, the owner, or the man who founded the company. And he would come in a room and he would say, listen, we are an IT company that just happens to move packages. Now, I believe that in the past, I don't know if they have kept up, right? Yeah. But I truly did believe that, and I saw it for many years.
I think that if you read, I'm a big fan of the FedEx or the Fred Smith story as well. Like big fan. Read all the books, followed along, and it's one of those things that now it's like, I guess it's the Clayton Christensen innovator's dilemma. Like, they're in this status where they're, a large corporation, can't move as fast. They probably are frustrated that new companies are coming in, biting at their heels. They're upset about that. But these companies just, they lose some of that over time. And now you've got, executives running the company that are more interested in the bottom line than innovating in technology. And that gives companies like myself or like Better Trucks the opportunity to come in and compete, especially combined with, technology like Shipping that can give us that real kind of competitive advantage and tie everything together. So I hear you on that. Their story is great, but it's still kind of living off that, maybe the promise that was made in the 80s or 90s and not the reality of today.
Exactly. And I don't mean to interject, but the Southwest model, what's happening there?
Yeah.
That's a complete tech issue.
Yeah.
So same thing, wonderful companies, enjoyed, years of customer service, et cetera. Perhaps some margin compression, you get some people in that want to make money and you don't go for tech.
I think there's kind of a general belief that you can just kind of, okay, we're done with our technology,
Yeah, like done, like,
I did,
okay,
kind of as if like, lawyers all said, the laws are done. We don't need to have lawyers anymore. So,
right,
but I think in general, the technology, it's continue, the world around you is continually changing, and so it's extremely important that you're always investing to kind of keep up with that. And that's just the reality. It's not you have to really view technology
it
as
is, yeah.
as a source of revenue, not as a cost center. Because the world will change. There's more opportunity there's new inputs, there's changing landscape, changing dynamics, changing all of that, and the software needs to kind of keep up with that. And so the minute that you kind of start to let go of that, the term we've used is bit rot, right? Where you start to see the
I like that.
not
I
keeping
do.
up with
Yeah.
yeah.
Let's wrap up on this topic, multi-carriers. Jason, when shippers join Shipium, they go from an average of 1 carrier to 6 in the first quarter. The multi-carrier movement has been happening in our industry for years now, but this would imply many are still beholden to one of the big guys. What are you seeing?
We're definitely seeing that pattern. I think the kind of the interesting way to look at it is that the challenge with multi-carrier is that effectively when you move from one carrier to many, it introduces complexity, right? It's certainly not going to be simpler. So I think if you're working with a single carrier and you go to multiples, it's going to introduce the complexity. And it's a really good example though of where software is there to kind of take that complexity and turn that into a structural advantage for you. And I think again, like, we've kind of been hammering this on this particular podcast, but if you don't kind of embrace technology as this enabler there, then it seems like a net negative thing. And I think traditionally retailers almost think of multiple carriers as a liability when they should think about it as an asset, but that's all about having that different perspective from a technology perspective, right? And so,
Yeah.
we're essentially doing, we do several things, but one of the things we do is we're kind of saying, we're going to virtualize all of your contracts with all your carriers, and then you're going to call us, and it's just as easy as calling a single carrier, but now we're going to go out and figure out what meets the transit time requirements that you have, and what's going to do it with the cheapest possible cost. And from your standpoint, it's just as simple as if you're working with one carrier, and that's kind of our goal in this exercise. But if you don't have the right technology, that's certainly not the case. And I think that's it's an example where kind of looking at the world through this lens of this is the way the world was in 1990 is not really applicable to the way the world is now, where you have the ability to use dynamic models that can make these decisions for you and give you improved speed, improved cost, improved, reduction of risk, because you're not beholden to one thing. And that's the magic of kind of moving to a tech first approach.
Well, gone are the days of, hey, can I have 6 months of your shipment history, origin, destination, zip, length, height, width, and then, I don't know, somebody comes back with something when I would negotiate a contract. I'd rather do about anything than go through a large FedEx or UPS contract, truly. And I know how to do it, and I'd really rather do about anything. Andy, when customers join the Better Trucks delivery network, what are some of the changes in their organization you see in the first 90 days of working with them?
Typically our network is built around this 1 to 2 day promise. So that's typically a big differentiator they're seeing. We have a much larger 1 day promise than many other carriers in our region. We're trying to continue to expand that network, but primarily that's the biggest advantage that they're seeing is a larger 1 day network at a very competitive price. Quality, we're really proud of our quality, and we expect there's a lot of improvements that they see there. Also, redundancy and reliability, as Jason mentioned, with the multi-carrier strategy, you have that. Our complexity is, we are no more complex than all the other carriers, usually feeding back into many different integration points that we have that give them the ability to see or better visibility. So they shouldn't have any problems there. But typically it's just, better speeds and solid delivery experience.
Yeah, I think as we continue to work together, the other aspect of that is that faster shipping. There's obviously the nice aspect of it arriving faster, but it's also about communicating upstream that this is going to arrive faster, which is for a retailer is a big conversion mover, right? And so wiring that into the rest of the industry outside of Amazon, is kind of my personal passion and mission, just because it makes, I think I often say that shipping is the most expensive part of an e-commerce business. It's also the biggest conversion driver in an e-commerce business. And so you really need to think about it a lot. It should be, if it's not number one on your list, it should be, in terms of both communicating that fast speed so you can drive the revenue side, and then also just making sure you hit it so you're keeping that customer loyalty and trust. And so obviously Andy and Better Trucks are a huge part of that whole equation.
Well, gentlemen, it's been an honor to meet you, and Andy, I always like to see you, especially at trade shows. Hoping to see you at the next one. This was absolutely incredible. We'll catch you on the next episode of Better Yet.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.